Emma Carter gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove home after a long day at the office. She had only been living in Willow Creek Estates for 3 months, but she was already starting to feel like she belonged. Her new house was modest, yet cozy, with a garage that she adored because it gave her space to store not just her car, but also her tools and personal projects. It was a small, independent structure that the previous owners had built years ago, something Emma considered perfect for keeping her life organized. Although Willow Creek Estates had a reputation for being one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, Emma had fallen in love with the tranquility it offered. Tall, lush trees formed a natural canopy over the paved streets, and the immaculate gardens reflected the residents' dedication. However, what Emma didn't know was that behind this facade of perfection and harmony lay a strict and, at times, relentless organization, the Homeowners Association, HOA. When she arrived home that evening, her heart sank as she saw what remained of her garage. Where the solid, functional structure once stood, there was now nothing but a pile of rubble. The walls had been reduced to dust, and scraps of wood and metal were scattered across the ground as if a bulldozer had mercilessly torn through it. Emma got out of her car in disbelief, looking around as if expecting to find some logical explanation. But there was none. What the hell happened here? She muttered to herself, feeling anger bubbling up inside her. A neighbor walking by stopped, briefly to say something. He was an older man, with reading glasses hanging from his neck and an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Oh, it's you. Well, I guess you found out. The HOA decided to demolish your garage this morning. They said you didn't have the proper permits or something like that." "What do you mean, something like that, and why didn't anyone tell me?" Emma asked, incredulous. The neighbor shrugged. "I don't know, dear. All I know is that they showed up early with a demolition crew. It all seemed very official. If you want answers, you should talk to them directly." Emma clenched her fists, trying to contain her frustration. She ran up the steps to her front door and went inside. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed the HOA office number. After several rings, a female voice answered on the other end of the line. "Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association office, how may we assist you?" "This is Emma Carter. I live at 24 Laurel Drive," Emma said firmly, though her tone betrayed her anger. "I want to know why my garage was demolished without my consent or prior notice." There was a brief silence on the other end before the secretary responded coldly. "Ms. Carter, we sent a letter weeks ago informing you about the lack of valid permits for your auxiliary structure. According to our rules, any construction without proper documentation must be removed." "A letter? I never received any letter," Emma shot back, raising her voice. "This is completely unacceptable. You can't just come in and destroy my property without following due process." The secretary seemed unfazed by her outrage. "I'm sorry to hear that, Ms. Carter, but these are the rules. If you have any issues, you can file a formal complaint. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other calls to attend to." Before Emma could respond, the line went dead. She frowned, furious at the woman's arrogance. She knew this wasn't going to end here. Determined to get answers, Emma decided to visit the HOA office in person the next day. The next day, Emma arrived at the HOA headquarters, located in a small renovated house near the center of the neighborhood. Inside, the atmosphere was as sterile as the rules they enforced. The walls were adorned with posters listing community regulations, from the ban on clotheslines to the maximum allowed height for bushes. A receptionist sitting behind a desk greeted her with a forced smile. "Good morning, how may I help you?" the young woman asked. "I want to speak with whoever is responsible for ordering the demolition of my garage," Emma said, crossing her arms. The receptionist hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone and making a quick call. Shortly after, Margaret Langley, the president of the HOA, appeared. She was a tall, thin woman dressed in an elegant suit that seemed out of place in this suburban setting. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her red-painted lips contrasted sharply with her stern expression. "Ms. Carter, I assume you're here about the garage issue," Margaret said in a tone that tried to sound sympathetic, though clearly it wasn't. "That's right," Emma replied, maintaining her firm stance. "I'd like to know why you decided to demolish my property without even notifying me." Margaret sighed dramatically, as if tired of having to explain something so obvious. Ms. Carter, our association has clear rules to ensure that all properties meet certain standards. Your garage did not have the necessary permits, and when we tried to contact you several times, we received no response. So we took corrective action. That's a lie, Emma exclaimed, unable to contain herself. I never received any notification. And even so, don't you think you could have given me the chance to resolve this before sending in a demolition team? Margaret looked down at her condescendingly. These are the rules, dear. If you can't comply with them, perhaps this isn't the place for you. Those words echoed in Emma's mind. Maybe Margaret thought she was intimidating another helpless resident. But what she didn't know was that Emma wasn't someone who would let herself be trampled on easily. In fact, Emma had just been hired as a corporate lawyer at one of the most prestigious firms in the state, specializing precisely in real estate law. This low blow from the HOA hadn't just enraged her, it had awakened her professional instincts. With a subtle but dangerous smile, Emma responded, "Very well, Mrs. Langley. Then I suppose we'll have to resolve this another way." Margaret blinked, surprised by the shift in Emma's tone, but quickly regained her composure. "Do whatever you need to do, Ms. Carter. I'm sure our actions were justified." Emma left the office with her jaw tight and her fists clenched. She knew exactly what to do next. This battle was just beginning, and Emma was ready to strike first. After her confrontation with Margaret Langley, Emma returned home with a mix of fury and determination burning inside her. She knew she couldn't just let what had happened slide. Not only had they demolished her garage without prior notice, but they had also done it illegally. And if there was one thing Emma Carter knew how to do, it was unravel laws and use them to her advantage. That night, after pouring herself a glass of wine to calm her nerves, Emma sat down at her desk with a notebook and her laptop. She began meticulously reviewing all the documents related to her property, the title of the house, the original blueprints of the garage, and any official correspondence she had received since purchasing the home. She also researched local regulations regarding construction and demolition permits. What she discovered confirmed her suspicions. The HOA had violated multiple legal procedures by acting so abruptly. First, according to state laws, any demolition required formal written notice sent via certified mail or delivered in person to the affected homeowner. Second, even if there was a dispute over permits, the HOA was obligated to offer a hearing where the resident could defend themselves before taking drastic measures like demolition. None of these steps had been followed in her case. This meant that the HOA's actions were not only unfair but completely illegal. Emma smiled to herself as she organized her findings. She knew she had enough ammunition to strike back, but she wanted to make sure her first move was devastating. She decided to draft a formal letter addressed to the HOA board, demanding full compensation for the damages caused and threatening to take legal action if they didn't respond within 5 business days. But she didn't stop there. She included copies of documents showing that she had already begun a preliminary investigation into the HOA's internal practices. She wanted them to know this wasn't going to be just another neighborhood squabble. The next morning, Emma sent the certified letter to the HOA office. She also made sure copies reached each member of the board, including Margaret Langley, ensuring no one could claim ignorance. While waiting for a response, she decided to dig deeper into the public records available on the HOA. That's when she found something that chilled her to the bone: financial irregularities. For years, the HOA had been charging residents extra fees under the pretext of community improvements, but many of those funds never seemed to materialize into actual projects. Moreover, some invoices and contracts suggested that part of the money had been used for the personal benefit of board members. Emma photocopied everything she could find, knowing this kind of information could be invaluable if she decided to take the case to court. At the HOA office, Margaret Langley opened Emma's letter with an uneasy feeling in her stomach. At first, she thought it would be yet another trivial complaint from a disgruntled resident, but as she read through it, her expression shifted from arrogance to sheer panic. "Who the hell is this woman?" Margaret asked incredulously, looking up at her secretary, who remained silent in front of her. Margaret read the letter aloud, though more to herself than anyone else. Dear Board of Directors of the Willow Creek Estates HOA, I hereby inform you that the demolition of my garage was carried out without following the proper legal procedures established by state laws. I demand immediate compensation for the damages caused, as well as a clear and verifiable explanation of the unfounded accusations regarding alleged invalid permits. If I do not receive a satisfactory response within 5 business days, I will proceed to take all necessary legal actions, including filing a class action lawsuit on behalf of other residents affected by your irregular practices. Margaret swallowed hard. The mention of a class action lawsuit made her break into a cold sweat. She knew many of the decisions made by the board could be considered questionable, and now this unknown woman, who was apparently a lawyer, was threatening to expose everything. She urgently called an emergency meeting with the other board members. When they all gathered in the small conference room, Margaret placed Emma's letter on the table, tapping it lightly to emphasize its gravity. We have a problem, Margaret said, her usually authoritative tone now tinged with nervousness. This woman is no ordinary resident. She's a lawyer and she's investigating our operations. She says she has evidence of irregularities and will sue us if we don't give her a solution. The other members exchanged worried glances. One of them, a man named Richard, tried to downplay the situation. It's just a letter. She's probably trying to scare us. But Margaret shook her head. No, this is serious. She mentioned a class action lawsuit. If that comes to light, we're finished. We need to fix this quickly. Meanwhile, Emma had already set her master plan in motion. She knew the letter was only the beginning. She had hired a private investigator to gather more information about the HOA's activities, especially their suspicious financial transactions. She also started discreetly talking to some neighbors who, though initially fearful, soon admitted they too had issues with the board. Emma was determined not only to get justice for her garage, but also to dismantle the corrupt system the HOA had built over the years. And this time no one was going to stop her. While waiting for a response from the HOA, Emma didn't waste a single second. She knew time was of the essence, and if she wanted to dismantle the organization from its very foundations, she needed irrefutable evidence. So, she dedicated every free moment to investigating the HOA's financial and operational records. What she discovered far exceeded her expectations. First, she reviewed the invoices and contracts obtained by her private investigator. At first glance, they seemed normal. Payments for landscaping, road repairs, and other community services. But upon closer inspection, she noticed something alarming. Several companies contracted by the HOA didn't legally exist. They were shell companies created to siphon off funds. For instance, an invoice for landscaping services amounted to $50,000, but the provider had no physical address or registered employees. The money simply disappeared. Then, Emma uncovered something even more shocking. Margaret Langley had used HOA funds to renovate her own house. There were clear receipts showing how expensive materials, like Italian marble and luxury appliances, had been paid for with money earmarked for community improvements. Additionally, a leaked email revealed conversations between Margaret and one of the HOA's accountants discussing how to justify these expenses under vague categories like structural upgrades. Emma also discovered that many residents had been deceived into paying extra fees without receiving anything in return. An elderly couple confided that they had spent thousands of dollars on supposed security upgrades, but never saw any tangible changes in the neighborhood. Another neighbor mentioned that cameras had been promised throughout the community, but they never arrived. Armed with this information, Emma decided to take the next step, organizing an extraordinary meeting of homeowners. To do so, she used social media and WhatsApp groups to spread the call. Although some neighbors were initially reluctant to confront the powerful board, Emma gained their trust by sharing fragments of the evidence she had gathered. On the day of the meeting, the community hall was packed. Neighbors, usually indifferent or fearful, now murmured among themselves, eager to find out what was going on. When Emma took the microphone, the atmosphere shifted completely. "Welcome, everyone," Emma began, her tone firm but calm. We are here today because our trust has been betrayed. For years, the HOA has been operating under corrupt practices that violate our laws and rights as residents. She projected documents and emails onto a screen detailing the irregularities. She showed how Margaret Langley had embezzled funds, how fake companies had been created to divert money, and how residents had been systematically deceived. The room erupted in murmurs of outrage. Margaret tried to defend herself, standing up with a feigned look of indignation. This is ridiculous. This woman is twisting facts to create chaos. Everything we've done has been for the good of the community, but her words rang hollow against the mountain of evidence Emma presented. One by one, the neighbors began to confront her. An older man stood up and said, "Where are the security cameras we were promised? Why does your house have imported marble, while our streets are still full of potholes?" Another woman added, "We paid extra fees for improvements, but we never saw anything. This is fraud." The pressure on Margaret and the board was unbearable. By the end of the meeting, it was clear they had lost the support of the majority of residents. Emma knew this was only the beginning. The extraordinary meeting generated such an uproar that public pressure forced the HOA to call for early elections to replace the board. However, Emma wasn't planning to stop there. With the evidence she had gathered, she decided to take the case to court. She filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all homeowners affected by the HOA's corrupt practices. The trial was widely covered by local media, and Emma quickly became a public figure. Her story attracted the attention of journalists, who highlighted her courage and skill in taking on such a powerful organization. During the legal proceedings, Emma exposed each of the crimes committed by the HOA, from the illegal demolition of structures to the misuse of community funds. She left no stone unturned. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial occurred when Emma presented an internal email sent by Margaret Langley. In it, Margaret admitted to authorizing the demolition of Emma's garage without following proper legal procedures, arguing that it was necessary to send a message to new residents. The judge looked at Margaret incredulously, and the audience in the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Additionally, Emma called key witnesses, including independent auditors and former board members who had resigned due to the corrupt practices. Each testimony reinforced the narrative that the HOA had operated as a criminal organization disguised as a community association. Finally, the verdict came. Margaret Langley and other key board members were found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. They were immediately arrested, and the HOA was forced to temporarily dissolve its operations while a full audit was conducted. Amid the chaos, Emma proposed a complete overhaul of the organization. She worked with a group of committed residents to draft new rules ensuring transparency and fairness. The new policies included regular audits, strict limits on the use of funds, and clear mechanisms for resolving disputes between residents and the HOA. Emma also ensured that all future projects would be overseen by an independent committee composed of democratically elected residents. Her goal was to restore trust in the community and prevent anything like this from happening again. After months of struggle, Emma finally managed to rebuild her garage, this time with all the necessary permits. But for her, the real triumph wasn't just recovering her property. It was transforming Willow Creek Estates into a fairer and more transparent place. Thanks to her leadership, a new board was established, composed of honest and committed residents. Among them were Sarah, a single mother who had always felt her voice didn't matter, Tom, a veteran who wanted to give back to the community, and Lisa, a young environmental activist who promoted sustainable initiatives for the neighborhood. Although many expected Emma to take an active role in the new HOA, she politely declined. She explained that her professional career as a corporate lawyer required all her time and energy, but she promised to keep a close eye on the community's activities to prevent future abuses. "I'm not a politician," Emma said during an interview with a local newspaper. "I'm a resident who believes in justice and doing the right thing. If I can inspire others to fight for their rights, then all of this will have been worth it." The story ended with Emma sitting in her new garage, which she had converted into an art studio. As she painted peacefully, she reflected on everything that had happened. She knew she had left an indelible mark on Willow Creek Estates, and that No one would ever underestimate her again. One day, while walking through the neighborhood, several neighbors approached her to personally thank her. One of them said, "Before, living here felt like being trapped in a gilded cage. Now, thanks to you, we truly feel at home." Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. She had achieved something much greater than revenge against the HOA. She had returned power to the people and demonstrated that even in the face of injustice, there is always room for change.